Hello friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 4th of April and we are going to deal with only one topic which is in news, and you can see it on the screen, that is Trump's reciprocal tariff impact on India and the world. Tariff is basically the taxes, import duty in this case, which America has decided to levy on the imports coming into America from other countries. America is a net importer and there is a trade deficit of $1.2 trillion which America faces. And Donald Trump, an inward-looking president of America, has decided to reduce this trade deficit. He has decided to do it by increasing the import duties on the products coming into America from other countries so that the domestic production could go up. This will not only lead to a global slowdown, but it will also cause inflation in the American economy. And this is not the first time when America is doing it. In 1930 also it did it and it led to the Great Depression. So there are experts who are pointing towards financial crisis in America after this. But let's see what happens. India, along with the entire world, is going to be impacted due to that. But the degree of impact can vary. So let's see what it is. Now, before getting into this topic, let us first know the basics about tariffs. Now, in our example, USA, India, USA exports to India and India exports to USA. The trade happens like this. But you know what? In our scenario, India has a trade surplus, means India's exports to USA are more than imports from USA. This is more. And now USA is wanting to levy tariffs over here, means import duty on the products coming in USA. Not only Indian products, but products from all across the world. Tariffs will increase the cost of the products, thereby causing inflation in USA. This increased tariffs will lead to demand suppression of those products, thereby leading to a global slowdown. Because when there will be demand suppression, goods will not be produced, and that is going to impact not only India but the entire world. But yes, why USA is doing it? USA is doing it because there is a huge trade deficit which USA is facing. In total, $1.2 trillion. And USA wants to reduce that. USA wants to reduce dependency upon other countries. And one way to do is increase the tariffs, thereby the domestic industries will be promoted and products will be produced in America. America has the capacity, the technology, the money, everything, the labor, everything it has. But it had outsourced the manufacturing largely. Now, USA is very simple of this viewpoint that you reduce tariff on US products coming to your country, I reduce tariff. India historically has been a protectionist country where tariffs are historically high. And the average tariffs levied by India on the American products entering the Indian market was 52%. The formula was simple. Donald Trump said half of it I will be levying on the Indian goods coming into my country. That is the formula on which it is, I would say, imposing these tariffs not only on India but on countries all across the world. So now we'll get a better understanding about this particular topic. So Donald Trump announced reciprocal tariffs. Reciprocal means these tariffs will be in tune or indexed with the amount of tariffs you levy on the American products. They will be half of it, but yes, they will be indexed with that. So they are aimed at addressing the US trade deficit, which is of approximately $1.2 trillion. It signifies US imports significantly more than its imports or exports. Now the key terminologies which will be used in our segment. The first is trade deficit. Trade deficit is a situation where exports are less than the imports or imports are more than the exports. Reciprocal tariffs, they are taxes, largely import duties, so imported goods we levy them. Reciprocal tariffs imply that the US will charge the same tariff rate on imports as the exporting country levies on the US goods. Protectionism. We can protect our country, like USA is imposing tariffs, so USA is entering into protectionism. India was already into protectionism because it is believed that India traditionally levies very high tariffs. The economic policy to protect domestic industries from foreign competition. Stagflation. a combination of stagnation and inflation. Stagnation is where economic growth has slowed down coupled with inflation. So that is expected to happen in USA. WTO, World Trade Organization, it is the regulator of world trade, and these duties and all can be levied under the, I would say, provisions of WTO only. Intellectual property, legal rights to inventions, designs and branded names. So patents, copyrights, trademarks, these are intellectual properties. Foreign direct investment, any investment coming from a foreign country which is being invested to create infrastructure, thereby leading to creation of jobs and all. That is what FDI means. And Smoot-Hawley Act. This act was passed in the year 1930. This raised US tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods at that time. The same which is happening right now. Aiming to protect domestic businesses and farmers. How domestic businesses and farmers will be protected? If cheaper products are coming from other countries and flooding your markets, who will buy the product of your domestic producers or farmers? So, increasing tariffs is a way to protect the interest of the domestic manufacturers or farmers. And that is what was done by USA in 1930. But ultimately, it worsened the situation and led to the Great Depression by sparking retaliatory tariffs and hindering international trade by USA. And a similar kind of situation is being predicted by many economic experts. But let's see what happens. The background of this US trade deficit. The trade deficit is when your imports are more as compared to your exports. So there is a trade deficit of $1.2 trillion. And they are seen as a sign of economic imbalance and are a focal point for policymakers. But why this trade deficit is there in US-like economy, which is the most, I would say, developed economy, the biggest economy? It has outsourced manufacturing. It has outsourced some less productive service sector works also, like BPOs and all, in search of cheap labor that will maximize the profit. Outsourcing secondary sector or manufacturing sector will put less burden on the natural resources of the country. Pollution will be less. So standard of living will be high and more focus will be on the tertiary sector, which has the highest value generating potential. So this is what they wanted to focus upon. And that is why in the pursuit of doing it, the trade deficit for USA increased a lot. Now, announcement on tariff. He said that base tariff of 10% will be levied on all countries. Earlier it was 2.5%. So base rate will start from April 5, 2025. Country specific tariffs. These tariffs will be levied based on the difference between tariffs imposed by other countries on US goods and the discounted reciprocal tariffs, which are half of the tariffs these countries impose. So example, India on an average imposes 52% tariffs. Then on India or goods coming from India, 26% tariff will be imposed. So this list is here. India 52%, 26% will be the reciprocal tariff. So like South Africa 60%, 30% will be the reciprocal tariff. Indonesia 64%, 32% will be the reciprocal tariff, and likewise. Cambodia imposes 97% tariff, 49% is the reciprocal tariff. So the worst impacted is going to be Cambodia. But yes, every country will be impacted. Now details of the tariff structure. There are two key features which have been kept into account. It varies by country and is based on two key factors. First is per capita income of that country. The average income per person in a country. Lower income countries like Cambodia, per capita income 2950, and Bangladesh, the per capita income of Bangladesh is also lower than India. They have been hit with very high tariffs despite their smaller share in US trade deficit. Their share in US trade deficit is only 1% or 0.5%, but the tariffs on the trade or good or items coming from these countries into US, they will be facing retaliatory tariffs. It is not too much considering into account the per capita situation. Share in the US trade deficit, countries contributing significantly to the US trade deficit like China and EU, they have received high tariffs despite having higher per capita income levels. So high tariffs on the Chinese and EU goods. Probably the highest tariff, one of the highest tariffs is on Chinese goods. Mexican goods also have been imposed tariffs. Now analysis of tariffs by countries. Cambodia has the highest tariff at 40% despite accounting for only 1% of the US trade deficit. Means out of $1.2 trillion deficit which USA faces, only 1% of it is coming from Cambodia. Country's low per capita income of $2,950 contributes to this high tariff. Why? Because Cambodia is underdeveloped or developing, and that is why it imposes tariffs on the American goods coming to its country. And now the reciprocal tariffs are indexed to or linked to the goods which, the tariff which that country imposes. So it is how, low per capita income leads to higher tariffs by those countries. Higher tariffs leads to higher tariffs by USA on the trade from those countries. Bangladesh, with an even lower per capita income, Bangladesh faces 37% tariff. It contributes only 0.5% of the US trade deficit. Again, lower per capita income, I would say, compulses Bangladesh to impose lower tariffs. Higher tariffs. So that leads to this situation. China, with a much higher per capita income and 25% share in the US trade deficit, China is subject to 34% tariff. So that is also a situation. So higher per capita income, but yes, a lot of trade from China is coming into US. The US is saying, by tariff to I'll impose. European Union accounts for almost 20% of the trade deficit and faces 20% tariff. Again linked with 40% tariff, average tariff EU might be imposing on the goods coming in from America. Switzerland and Singapore, both countries with higher per capita incomes than the US, have been subjected to tariffs despite their positive trade relations with US. Countries with a US trade surplus, means USA is having a trade surplus with those countries like UK, Brazil, Singapore or Colombia. Unfortunately, these countries also face this kind of reciprocal tariff. It is not only to those countries with which USA is facing a trade deficit, it is applicable to those countries also with which USA is facing or USA is experiencing a trade surplus. That is also to be noted over here. So it is kind of, one slap sweeps all. So it is like this. Now specifically talking about India's position, 26% tariff, which is half of the tariff imposed by India on the American goods coming into the Indian markets, that is 52%. So India-US trade relations, if I talk about these trade relations, the total trade $82.52 billion from April to November. Total trade is वैसे $120-30 billion around, and USA is in the top 2 trading partners apart from China for India. India's exports to US $52.89 billion and imports $29.63 billion, means India has a trade surplus and USA has a trade deficit in this scenario. So India's trade surplus is $23.26 billion for this period. US was India's second largest trading partner during this period. Top imports from the US, what we do? Mineral fuels and oils, precious, semi-precious stones, nuclear reactors, boilers, electrical machinery, aircrafts and parts, aircraft like Boeing from America. Top export items: engineering goods we export, electronic goods we export, gems and jewelry we export, drugs and pharmaceuticals we export, and petroleum products, means refined petroleum, we export to USA. So this is item by item list. US Trade Department's report on India. So according to the US Trade Department, India imposes higher agricultural tariffs. Why? Because India wants to protect the interest of the domestic farmer. And according to the WTO, we are entitled to, impose agricultural tariffs up to 300%, and on an average, we impose 113.1%. USA and other countries also are putting pressure on India to reduce this tariff on agricultural products. And India says that I will be compromising the interest of my domestic farmers, so it is difficult for me to do so. So unilateral tariff increase. India has raised tariffs multiple times without public consultation or proper notice given to those countries. For example, in 2019-20 budget, tariffs were increased on 70 product categories without prior notification. India adopts a lot of protectionist policies. India traditionally is considered to be protectionist because India has signed very less free trade agreements or trade agreements with other countries. Overall average tariff is high, which we've seen in context of, I would say, New Zealand very recently, where we discussed about, India-New Zealand trade agreement. So US has criticized India's increasing protectionist stance, policies aimed at shielding domestic industries from the cheaper products which are available in the international markets. It includes the imposition of tariffs on goods such as telecommunications equipment, solar products and electronics. We will have to do that, otherwise China will flood our markets. Intellectual property and FDI. So intellectual property, India is always on the special 301 priority watch list issued by the US Trade Representative Department every year. Why? Because India violates the intellectual property right norms according to USA. USA wants to promote evergreening of patents. Evergreening of patent means that your patent continues forever and you are eligible to take royalty on that forever, which obviously will increase the cost of that product forever. However, India does not, or Indian IPR laws does not, I would say, acknowledge evergreening, and that is why there is this bone of contention between India and USA with respect to intellectual property. With respect to FDI also, there have been certain issues that FDI restrictions in retail are seen as obstacles to fair trade by USA. Then subsidies and distortions. USA believes that India gives a lot of subsidies to its farmers specifically, and these subsidies make the products less, I would say, or make the products cheaper, which I would say destroy the playground for the foreign products to come and compete with the Indian products. So these subsidies create a lot of market distortion in favor of the domestic farmers and all. These distortions affect the competitive landscape for imported products. Localized internet shutdowns. There are too many. India is a country in which there are maximum number of internet shutdowns which have happened in the recent past. And these internet shutdowns have had a profound impact on the digital economy, not only of India but the entire world. According to a report I was reading, economic losses worth $15 billion happened due to internet shutdowns in the last 2 years to India. And that is not a small amount, I would say. And this is concerning for countries like USA, which are heavily, I would say, intrinsic with the digital economy. So this is what the US Trade Department report on India says, that India does all these things and that is why India is not a fair trade partner for us and all. Now, global economic implications, next topic, which is this particular rise in tariff is going to have. So first of all, impact on US economy. There will be slower growth because these tariffs are expected to slow down global trade. Slower growth not only in America but in the entire world, because this increased tariffs will lead to raised prices, higher inflation. Higher inflation can lead to reduced demands. There will be demand suppression, and demand suppression will slow down the global trade. So all these are linked, and these inflationary pressures can cause various other phenomena over there. There is risk of stagflation attached. Stagflation is a situation where the economy experiences slow growth. Economic growth will slow down because of demand suppression, and high inflation. Inflation will be there because of rise in tariffs. So slow growth plus high inflation is equal to stagflation, and there is this high risk of stagflation which is there imminent on the US economy. Impact on the global trade. The slower growth will be there globally because many countries were exporting to America, and the demand suppression of those goods in America definitely will lead to less productivity, and less productivity will lead to slower growth rate. Now the extent of this impact will vary depending on the degree to which they depend on trade with the US. European and Asian responses. EU, 30% of global trade, and Asia, 35% of the global trade, could look to mitigate the impact by strengthening trade ties within their own regions, reducing their dependence on US over time. So what we can do is we can sideline US, tum badhate raho tariff, whatever you want to do, whatever economic losses or trade losses we are going to have with you, we are going to compensate among ourselves. We are going to increase trade among ourselves because they are also reducing their dependence. EU is also reducing their dependence on USA. We are also reducing, but somewhere that vacuum has to be filled by someone. So let's fill this vacuum for each other. This is what a perspective in this can be seen. Now, how should India navigate these tariffs? Definitely, India faces a dual challenge of protecting its domestic policy. We cannot compromise on the interest of our domestic farmers. We cannot reduce the tariffs up to a certain extent or beyond a certain extent. We need to prioritize their interest. We need to defend our protectionist policies. And simultaneously, we need to reform domestic policies as well. Wherever possible, reduce the tariffs, enhance your productivity capabilities, make in India, so that the demand of your products increases worldwide. In India also, your demand of your products increases. So your products are better than the global products. Automatically, the demand for your products in India and in the world will increase. Improve transparency, intellectual property enforcement. Wherever possible, reform the intellectual property rights. Reform in agricultural subsidies. Reduce agricultural subsidies that distort global markets. But yes, up to a certain extent only, so that the farmer's interest does not get compromised. And FDI and market access, opening up market further, especially in sectors like retail and banking. Like we're talking about opening up sector, this markets in the nuclear power generation sector for the private players to come and invest. So these kind of steps can be taken by the government. But yes, we should not forget that the national interest of India should not be compromised in doing so. Donald Trump is here for 4 years, but the national interest is here forever to stay. This is what we need to do. We need to manage the situation, no doubt about this fact. And India is not the only one with which this has happened. This hasn't happened with the entire world. So collectively we can find a solution to this. And obviously we should convince America not to do it, because Vasudev Kutumbakam, the entire world is one family, and this entire world or one of the family members is America also. So we should convince it to do a fair game. So this is how we can approach this. So with this, we come to an end of today's session. No MCQs today. Only this topic I wanted to focus upon and discuss in detail, because this is important. And now we will be meeting tomorrow with more such informative news pieces. Till then, you guys very well know what to do. Keep studying, keep reading, keep writing, and most importantly, keep revising. Namaste. Jai Hind.